When a desperate screenwriter named Vera sat across from Clint Eastwood in 1993, she had no idea that 3 simple words would destroy her entire future. Vera was a single mom. She worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. Her daughter Margot was incredibly talented at piano and dreamed of going to the best music school in America. But there was one huge problem. The school cost $60,000 per year. Vera made less than $50,000 total working both of her jobs combined. Then something amazing happened. A movie studio called her. They wanted her to write a Western movie starring Clint Eastwood himself. They offered her $2 million. $2 million! That was enough money to change everything. Enough for her daughter's school. Enough to finally stop struggling. Vera spent 6 days writing the perfect script. She barely slept. She lived on coffee and peanut butter sandwiches. The story was about a tough bounty hunter named Jackson, who hadn't let anyone close to his heart for 30 years. But then he met a strong widow named Eleanor. Slowly, Jackson started to care again. And at the end of the movie, in the most important scene, Jackson would finally say the words he'd been afraid to say for 3 decades. 3 simple words. I love you. The studio loved the script. Everything was perfect. Vera started planning for her daughter's future. She bought new sheet music. She splurged on Chinese food. For the first time in years, she felt like she could finally breathe. Then her phone rang. Miss Costello, Mr. Eastwood needs to see you in his office. He has concerns about the script. Vera's heart dropped into her stomach. Concerns? Yeah, what kind of concerns? She drove to the studio with sweaty palms and a racing mind. When she walked into Clint Eastwood's office, he looked her straight in the eye and said something that would change her life forever. I've read your script 4 times. It's exceptional, but I won't say the line. Vera was confused. Which line? Page 98. I love you. I won't say it, not for any price. Vera felt the room spinning around her. That line was everything. The whole movie built up to that moment. Without it, nothing made sense. Without it, audiences wouldn't cry. Without it, the studio might cancel the entire project. But that's the whole point of the ending, she stammered. Clint shook his head firmly. Those 3 words have become cheap in movies. People throw them around like they cost nothing. But real love isn't about words. It's about actions. It's about sacrifice. If I say I love you just because the script tells me to, I'm lying about what those words actually mean. Vera's mind raced. She thought about her daughter, about Juilliard, about the $2 million that would solve all their problems. She thought about the years of struggle, the burnt toast, the late rent payments, the fear that never went away. I have 48 hours to rewrite it, the studio told her. Or we're hiring someone else. 48 hours. 2 days to fix the unfixable. 2 days to write an ending that worked without the most important line in the entire script. Vera went home and sat at her typewriter. She wrote version after version after version. Nothing worked. Everything felt wrong, empty, incomplete, and the trash can filled with crumpled pages. The clock kept ticking. Her daughter kept practicing piano, not knowing their future was falling apart. Then Vera made a decision that terrified her. A decision that would either save everything or destroy it all. She wrote a letter, not to the studio, not to her agent, but to Clint Eastwood himself. In that letter, she told him the truth about something she'd never admitted to anyone before. And what happened next, nobody could have predicted. Not the screenwriter, not the movie star, not anyone. Because sometimes the most important stories aren't about the words people say. They're about the choices people make when nobody's watching. They're about what you're willing to sacrifice for the people you love. What was in that letter? What did Vera decide to do? Did she lose the $2 million? Did her daughter ever make it to music school? And what about that line? Did Clint Eastwood ever say it? Watch this whole video to find out what happened when one woman chose truth over money, and one actor refused to compromise even when it cost him everything. The answer will surprise you, And it might just change how you think about love forever. The archive room at Warner Brothers smelled like old paper and forgotten dreams. Vera Costello pressed her fingertips against the yellowed script page, feeling the texture of decisions made 31 years ago. The overhead fluorescent light flickered, casting shadows across 3 words circled in red ink. I love you. Her hands trembled. At 73, Vera's hands trembled a lot these days, but this was different. This was memory made physical. Mrs. Costello? The young archivist poked his head through the doorway. We close in 10 minutes. I know. Her voice came out scratchy. Just 10 more minutes. She'd driven 2 hours from her small house in Pasadena to see this page, to remember the moment everything changed, to touch the evidence of the line that Clint Eastwood refused to say for any price. The page blurred. Vera blinked hard, forcing the tears back. She wasn't here to cry. She was here to remember how it all started. October 1993. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning while Vera was burning toast. Ms. Costello, this is Richard Feldman from Warner Brothers. We'd like to offer you the lead writing position on Dust and Devotion. The toast fell from her hand onto the kitchen floor. Her daughter Margot looked up from her chemistry homework, eyes wide. I'm sorry. Now, could you repeat that? Vera's voice barely worked. $2 million. Clint Eastwood attached to star and direct. We need a writer who understands westerns and heartbreak. Your script for The Long Road showed us you can do both. The Long Road had never been produced. It had collected 17 rejection letters before she'd shoved it in a drawer and gone back to writing forgettable television episodes about forgettable people. Yes, of course. When do you need me? Yesterday, Feldman laughed. But we'll settle for Monday. When Vera hung up, she stood frozen in her kitchen, staring at the burnt toast on the linoleum. Margot jumped up from the table, 16 years old and electric with hope. Mom, what happened? We're going to be okay. Vera pulled her daughter into her arms, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. Baby, we're going to be okay. That night, after Margot went to bed, Vera sat at her desk and calculated numbers she'd memorized long ago. $2 million. Minus agent fees, minus taxes, minus what she owed on the house. It would be enough. Enough for Margot's college. Enough to stop waitressing on weekends. Enough to finally breathe. Margot wanted Juilliard. She'd wanted it since she was 8 years old and heard Chopin for the first time. She practiced piano 4 hours a day in their cramped living room on an upright Vera had bought used for $300. The girl had talent. Real talent. The kind that made Vera's chest ache with pride and terror. Juilliard cost $60,000 a year, while Vera made $32,000 writing TV episodes and another $14,000 serving coffee and eggs to people who barely looked at her face. But $2 million? That was everything. That was Margot's future wrapped in a contract. Vera pulled out fresh paper and began to write. She wrote for 6 days straight, sleeping 3 hours a night, living on black coffee and peanut butter sandwiches. The story poured out of her like she'd been carrying it her whole life. Dust and Devotion told the story of Jackson Reeves, a bounty hunter who'd spent 30 years running from everything soft in the world. 30 years since the fire that took his wife and unborn child. 30 years of sleeping under stars and trusting no one. Then Eleanor arrived, a widow running a struggling ranch, tough as leather and twice as stubborn. She didn't need rescuing. She didn't want Jackson's help. But slowly, through shared hardship and quiet mornings, something grew between them. Something that terrified Jackson more than any outlaw ever had. The ending came to Vera at 3 in the morning on the 6th day. Jackson would finally speak the words he'd locked away for 3 decades. He'd tell Eleanor what she'd done for him. He'd say the thing that cost him everything to admit. On page 98, Vera typed, Jackson looks at Eleanor, his weathered face finally soft. I love you. 3 words, 30 years, everything. She leaned back in her chair, exhausted and exhilarated. It was perfect. It was everything the story needed. The studio loved it. Feldman called personally. "Vera, it's brilliant. Eastwood's reading it this weekend. We're moving forward." That weekend, Vera took Margot shopping for new sheet music. They splurged on Chinese takeout. They laughed. For the first time in years, Vera felt like she wasn't drowning. Monday morning, her phone rang. "Miss Costello, we need you to come to Mr. Eastwood's office. He has concerns about the script." Vera's stomach dropped. "Concerns?" "He'll explain in person. Can you be here at 2?" She drove to Burbank with her hands gripping the steering wheel too tight, trying not to imagine all the ways her future could collapse in a single meeting. She had no idea that Clint Eastwood was about to refuse the one line that made everything matter. The production office sat on the Warner Brothers lot like a monument to dreams. Vera had been here before for smaller meetings, but never like this. Never with everything riding on what happened in the next hour. Her hands were sweating. She wiped them on her skirt for the 3rd time as she waited in the lobby. Through the window, she could see the famous water tower, the same one from countless movies. It felt surreal. All of this felt surreal. "Miss Costello? He's ready for you." The assistant, a young man with kind eyes, led her down a hallway lined with movie posters. She recognized some of them. Unforgiven. The outlaw Josie Wales. Stories about hard men in hard times. Men who showed everything through silence and action. Her script suddenly felt too soft in her hands. The office door opened. Clint Eastwood stood by the window, backlit by afternoon sun. Even at 63, he commanded a room without trying. Director, actor, legend. He turned, and Vera saw the script on his desk, her script, marked with notes in the margins. "Mrs. Costello." His voice was exactly like in the films, gravel and honey. "Thank you for coming." "Mr. Eastwood." She shook his hand, trying to keep hers steady. "Clint, please, sit down." The director seated himself across from her. Between them, her script sat like evidence at a trial. He touched it gently, the way someone might touch something precious and problematic at the same time. "I've read your script 4 times, he began. "Most scripts I read once. Good ones, maybe twice, but this one..." He paused, choosing words carefully. "This one got under my skin. Jackson Reeves is real. I know this man. I've played versions of him, but you've written something deeper here." Vera's heart soared. "Thank you. That means... But I won't say the line." The words hung in the air like smoke. Vera blinked, confused. "I'm sorry?" "Page 98, the ending. I love you." "I won't say it. Not for any price." The room tilted slightly. Vera gripped the arms of her chair. "I don't... Which part of the ending? We can adjust the scene setup, the blocking, whatever you need." "Those 3 words specifically." Clint leaned forward, his eyes steady and serious. "I won't speak them." "But that's..." Vera's mind raced through 30 years of movies. "You've played romantic leads before. You've done love stories. Surely you've said..." "Not in any film I've directed. Not in any character I've had full control over." His voice was calm but immovable. "And I won't start now." The panic started small in Vera's chest and spread outward like spilled water. And the ending was the point. The entire story built to that moment. Jackson finally admitting what Eleanor meant to him. The confession was the catharsis. Without it, the whole structure collapsed. "Mr. Eastwood, Clint." That line is the emotional climax of the entire film. Everything builds to Jackson finally being vulnerable enough to say what he feels. The audience needs to believe it. He picked up the script, flipping to the marked page. And they won't. Not if it comes easy, not if it's just words. It's not just words. It's the culmination of his entire arc. He's spent 30 years running from intimacy, from connection, from admitting he could love someone again after losing everything. When he finally says it to Eleanor, it's cheap. The word cut through her explanation like a knife. Vera felt her face flush. Cheap? Clint's expression softened slightly, but his conviction didn't waver. I don't mean your writing is cheap. I mean those words have become cheap in movies. We throw them around like they cost nothing. Characters say, I love you in the rain, in airports, in hospital rooms, and audiences cry because they're trained to cry. But real love, the kind Jackson would feel, that's not words. That's action. That's sacrifice. That's being there when it costs you everything. Vera's throat tightened. She thought of Margot at home, practicing piano, dreaming of Juilliard. She thought of the $2 million, of finally being able to stop struggling, stop choosing between electricity and groceries, stop feeling like she was failing her daughter every single day. I understand your philosophy, she said carefully, but the studio approved this script. The financing is based on this story, this ending. If we change the climax now, they'll find another writer. Clint said it without cruelty, just fact. I know, Richard already told me. You have 48 hours to rewrite the ending, or they bring in someone else. Then why are we having this meeting? The words came out sharper than she intended. If you're going to get me replaced anyway, why explain your reasoning? For the first time, something shifted in Clint's expression. He looked at her, really looked, and Vera saw something she hadn't expected. Respect, maybe, or recognition. Because I want you to understand this isn't about ego or being difficult. I've played dozens of characters, hard men, quiet men, men who show love through what they do, not what they say. My father... He stopped, and something passing across his face. My father never said those words to me. Not once in his whole life, but I knew. I knew because he showed up. Because he worked 2 jobs to keep us fed. Because when I was sick, he sat by my bed all night. The office was very quiet. Outside, Vera could hear voices, people walking past, the normal sounds of a studio lot. But in here, the silence felt sacred. If I have Jackson say, I love you because the script calls for it, because audiences expect it, because it's the easy way to make them cry, I'm lying about what those words cost. I'm saying they're simple when they're not. I'm making them cheap when they should be the most expensive thing a man like Jackson could ever give. Vera's eyes burned. She wasn't sure if it was anger or something else. I have a daughter, she heard herself say. She's 16. She wants to go to Juilliard. This movie, this paycheck, it's her future. It's everything we need. And you're telling me I have to choose between my artistic vision and her dreams because you won't say 3 words? Clint stood up, walking back to the window. I'm telling you that some things matter too much to compromise. Even when the cost is high. Maybe especially then. He turned back to her, and his face was kind but unyielding. 48 hours, Miss Costello. Find a way to end this story that doesn't need those words. Find a way to show Jackson's love that makes the words unnecessary. Do that, and you'll have written something that lasts, something true. And if I can't, then they'll hire someone who will write what I want. But it won't be your story anymore, and that would be a shame. Yeah, because you understand Jackson better than anyone else could. The meeting was over. Vera stood on shaking legs, gathering her script, her purse, the pieces of her composure. At the door, she turned back. Can I ask you something? Of course. Have you ever said it in real life? Those 3 words? Clint was quiet for a long moment. Once. To someone who already knew. The words didn't change anything. They just confirmed what was already true. Vera nodded slowly, not sure what to do with that information. She left the office and walked to her car in a daze. The sun was setting over the lot, painting everything gold and red. Beautiful and ending. She had 48 hours to rewrite the ending or lose everything. She sat in her car and finally let herself cry. Great gulping sobs that shook her whole body. When she was empty, she started the engine and drove home to her daughter, to her tiny house, to her typewriter. She had no idea how to fix this. No idea how to give Clint Eastwood what he wanted while keeping the story intact. But she had to try. Margot's future depended on it. Vera didn't tell Margot what happened at the meeting. When she walked through the door at 7:30, her daughter was at the piano, working through a Rachmaninoff piece that made the whole house vibrate with longing. Vera stood in the doorway and watched Margot's fingers move across the keys. Certain, precise, fearless. How did you raise a fearless child when you were terrified all the time? Mom? Margot stopped mid-phrase. You okay? How did it go? Fine. The lie tasted like metal. Just some script revisions. Normal stuff. Margot's face lit up. So the movie's still happening? Yeah, baby. Still happening. That night, after Margot went to bed, Vera sat at her typewriter and stared at a blank page. The cursor on her electric typewriter blinked at her like an accusation. She'd rolled the paper in 2 hours ago. Nothing had appeared. How do you write a love story without the words that mean love? She typed, Jackson looks at Eleanor. He wants to tell her everything, but... She ripped the page out, crumpled it, threw it at the wall. Started again. Jackson takes Eleanor's hand. In the touch, she understands. Too vague, too easy. Another crumpled page joined the first. Jackson. You mean more to me than... No, Eastwood was right. It was cheap. Dancing around the words didn't make them less necessary. It just made the writing cowardly. By midnight, the floor around her desk looked like a paper graveyard. Vera's eyes burned. Her back ached. The coffee had gone cold hours ago. She picked up the phone and dialed. It rang 4 times before a sleepy voice answered. This better be important, Vera. Roland, I need help. Roland Hutchins had been writing screenplays since before Vera was born. He'd taught her everything she knew about structure, character, the invisible architecture that made stories breathe. He'd also worked with Clint Eastwood on 2 films in the 70s, back before Roland's drinking cost him his career. Now, he lived in a small apartment in Santa Monica, sober for 6 years, occasionally consulting on scripts for old friends who remembered when he was brilliant. It's 1 a.m, Roland said, but she could hear him sitting up, reaching for his glasses. Jan, what happened? Vera told him everything. The meeting, the line, the 48 hours ticking away like a bomb. When she finished, Roland was quiet for so long she thought he'd fallen asleep. Roland? I'm here, just thinking. He sighed. 20 years ago, Clint turned down $10 million for a film. You know why? Tell me. The script had him playing a detective whose mother was dying of cancer. Beautiful part, actually. Oscar bait. But there was a deathbed scene where he had to tell her he loved her, that he forgave her for all the years of distance between them. The producers offered him everything. Points on the back end, director approval, casting control. $10 million up front. Vera gripped the phone tighter. What did he do? Walked away. People thought he was insane. But he told me something I never forgot. Roland's voice got quieter, like he was sharing a secret. He said, My father never said those words to me. I never said them to him before he died. If I throw them around on screen like they're easy, like they fix everything, I'm lying about what they cost. I'm pretending that saying them is the same as living them. The words hit Vera like a physical blow. She thought about her own father, dead now for 12 years. Had he ever said it? She couldn't remember. What she remembered was him teaching her to ride a bike, his hands steady on the seat. Him sitting through her terrible middle school play about the Pilgrims. Him working overtime at the factory so she could go to college. He'd never said the words, but she'd known anyway. Vera, you still there? Yeah. Her voice came out rough. What do I do, Roland? How do I end this story without the confession? That's the wrong question. What? You're asking how to end it without the words. But what you should be asking is, What would Jackson actually do? Not what would make audiences cry. Not what would feel satisfying according to screenwriting rules. What would a man who's been running for 30 years actually do when he finally stops running? Vera closed her eyes. Thought about Jackson. Really thought about him. Not as a character serving her plot, but as a person with weight and history and wounds that didn't heal just because the script said so. He wouldn't say it, she whispered. No, Roland agreed. He wouldn't. Men like Jackson, men like my father, men like Clint's father, they show up. They stay. They make the hard choice when no one's watching. Nah, that's their language. So I write him staying? That's the ending? I don't know. That's your job to figure out. But stop trying to make him someone he's not just because you need a certain kind of ending. Let him be who he actually is. They talked for another hour. Roland didn't solve the problem. He never did. But he reminded Vera why she became a writer in the first place. Not to manipulate emotions. To tell the truth about people even when the truth was inconvenient. When she hung up, it was nearly 3 a.m. Vera made fresh coffee and sat back down at her typewriter. She wrote 6 different versions of the ending. In one, Jackson proposed marriage instead of confessing love. But it felt like a cheat, just substituting one declaration for another. In another, Eleanor said the words first and Jackson nodded. But that made him passive, weak. In a third version, she cut to black on Jackson's face before he could speak, but that was just cowardice disguised as ambiguity. Nothing worked. Every version felt hollow, incomplete, like a sentence missing its verb. The sun came up. Vera was still writing. Margot found her at the typewriter at 7, surrounded by crumpled pages, her eyes red and exhausted. Mom, did you sleep at all? I'm fine, baby. Margot picked up one of the discarded pages, reading. Her face went soft. This is beautiful. It's garbage. No, really, this part where he burns the bounty notice to stay with her? That's real love, Mom. That's sacrifice. Vera looked up sharply. What did you say? The bounty notice. He burns it. He gives up everything to stay. But Vera wasn't listening anymore. Something had clicked in her mind, pieces falling into place like tumblers in a lock. Sacrifice. Not words. Action. Cost. She started typing again, fast now, her fingers flying across the keys. Margot watched, confused but fascinated. Mom? Not now, baby. I'm sorry. I have to finish this. Margot left quietly. Vera barely noticed. She was inside Jackson's head now, understanding him completely for the first time. He wouldn't say the words, but he would make a choice that meant more than any words could. He would give up the thing he'd been chasing for 30 years, revenge, closure, the bounty that would let him finally rest, and he would do it without fanfare, without explanation, without expecting Eleanor to even know. The ending poured out of her in 90 minutes. When she typed the final period, her hands were shaking. It was perfect. It was everything the story needed. It was true. But it wasn't what the studio had approved. It wasn't the crowd-pleasing confession that would make audiences cry and tell their friends to see the movie. Vera looked at the clock. 26 hours left. The phone rang. She jumped, heart pounding. Miss Costello, it's Richard Feldman, just checking in. How's the rewrite coming? Her mouth went dry. She looked at the pages beside her typewriter. Her new ending, risky and quiet and real. It's done, she said. Fantastic. Can you have it to us by end of day? This was the moment. She could send them the new ending and pray they understood it. Or she could write something safer, something closer to what they expected. Something that would guarantee her paycheck and Margot's future. Miss Costello? I'll have it to you by 5, she said. When she hung up, she sat very still, staring at her typewriter. Then she did something she hadn't done in years. She called her own agent. Saul, it's Vera. I need you to tell me the truth about something. If I turn in an ending that's brilliant but risky, what are the chances Warner Brothers fires me anyway?" Saul was quiet. Then, "Honestly, 60-40 against you, maybe worse. They want bankable, they want tested, they don't want brave." "That's what I thought." She hung up and looked at the pages, her real ending, the true one. Then she looked at Margot's college brochure stacked on the kitchen table. The choice should have been simple. Safety over art. Her daughter's future over her ego. That's what a good mother would choose. But as she sat there, something Roland had said came back to her. Stop trying to make him someone he's not, just because you need a certain kind of ending. Wasn't she doing the same thing to herself? Making herself someone she wasn't, someone who would compromise the truth of the story, because she needed a certain kind of outcome? Vera put her head in her hands. This was impossible. There was no right answer. At 4:30, she put the pages in an envelope. At 4:45, she drove to Warner Brothers. At 4:55, she stood in the lobby, envelope in hand. The receptionist smiled. "For Mr. Feldman?" Vera nodded, unable to speak. She handed over the envelope containing her new ending, the true ending, the risky one, and walked out before she could change her mind. That night, she couldn't eat. Margot kept asking if she was okay. Vera kept lying and saying yes. At midnight, she gave up trying to sleep. She went to her desk and did something she never did. She wrote a letter, not to the studio, not to her agent, to Clint Eastwood. The words came easier than any script had. She told him about Margot, about fear, about how she'd spent years saying, "I love you" to her daughter while checking her watch, while thinking about deadlines, while being physically present but mentally absent. She told him about her own father, about rewriting the ending, about finally understanding that love wasn't the easy declaration. It was the hard choice, made quietly when no one was watching. She wrote, "You're right, the line is cheap, but not because love is cheap, because I made it cheap. And I wrote Jackson saying, 'I love you,' because I wanted the easy catharsis. I wanted audiences to cry without earning it. Just like I've wanted my daughter to know I love her without me having to sacrifice my ambition, my time, my ego." At 3 a.m, she sealed the letter and addressed it to Eastwood's office. She didn't expect a response. She just needed him to know that she understood. The next morning, before she could second-guess herself, she drove to the studio and hand-delivered the letter. Then she went home and called Richard Feldman. "Richard, it's Vera Costello. I need to tell you something. Hire the other writer. I'm done." The silence on the other end was deafening. "Vera, what are you talking about? We received your revised ending. It's under review. You can't just..." I am. I'm find someone else." She hung up before he could argue. That evening, Margot came home with an envelope. Her hands were shaking as she opened it. Juilliard, acceptance letter, full tuition, $60,000 per year. Margot's face was radiant for exactly 10 seconds. Then she read the financial requirements and her expression crumbled. "Mom." Her voice was very small. "We can't afford this, can we?" This was the moment Vera had been dreading for months. The moment where she had to tell her brilliant, talented daughter that dreams cost more than they had. But something had shifted in Vera over the past 48 hours. Instead of making promises she couldn't keep, instead of offering false hope or easy reassurances, she did something harder. She told the truth. "No, sweetheart, we can't." Margot's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. "I knew, I hoped." "I know, baby." They sat together on the couch, and Vera told her everything. About the movie, about Eastwood, about the choice she'd made to walk away. About how sometimes the right thing and the smart thing weren't the same. "You gave up $2 million because of 3 words?" Margot asked. "I gave up $2 million because they were the wrong 3 words, and I couldn't live with making them cheap." Margot was quiet for a long time. Then she said, Play me something? Vera blinked. What? You used to play piano. Before you got so busy. Before Dad left, I remember. Honey, I haven't touched a piano in... I know, but I want you to. Right now. With me. So Vera sat at the piano bench next to her daughter. Her fingers felt clumsy, uncertain. But she played, a simple melody, and nothing like Margot's complex pieces. Just a few notes, hesitant but true. Margot joined in, weaving around Vera's melody, making it beautiful. They played for 20 minutes, no phones, no scripts, no deadlines, just mother and daughter making something together. When they finished, Margot leaned her head on Vera's shoulder. I'm proud of you, Mom. Vera couldn't speak. She just held her daughter and tried not to cry. At midnight, there was a knock at the door. Vera opened it to find a courier holding a large envelope. Ms. Vera Costello? Delivery from Clint Eastwood's office. Her hands shook as she signed for it. Inside the envelope was something that would change everything. Again. Vera's fingers trembled as she tore open the envelope. Margot appeared beside her, eyes wide with curiosity. Yeah, what is it? I don't know yet. Inside was a single sheet of paper, expensive stationery, the kind that whispered of old Hollywood and handwritten thank you notes. The handwriting was angular, masculine, unmistakable. Miss Costello, I got your letter. Read it 3 times, just like your script. You're right about everything you said, and you're wrong about one thing. You're not done with this movie. Not yet. Come to my office tomorrow. 10 a.m. Bring your daughter. Clint Vera read it twice, then a third time. Bring your daughter? What did that mean? Was this good news, or was he letting her down gently, in person, with Margot there to... What? She couldn't make sense of it. Mom, what does it say? Vera handed her the note. Margot read it quickly, her face shifting from confusion to something like hope. That he wants to meet me? I guess so. Tomorrow, but I have school. And you said you quit. You said... I know what I said. Vera's mind was spinning. We'll figure it out. I need to think. But there was no thinking that night. Vera lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling, imagining 100 different scenarios. Maybe Eastwood wanted to meet Margot to explain personally why her mother's stubbornness had cost them everything. Maybe it was some kind of Hollywood courtesy, a gentle goodbye. Maybe... She couldn't let herself hope. Hope was dangerous. At 9:30 the next morning, Vera and Margot pulled into the Warner Brothers lot. Margot wore her best dress, navy blue, the one she'd worn to her piano recital last spring. Vera had barely slept and felt like she was walking through fog. The same assistant from before greeted them. His expression was carefully neutral. Ms. Costello, and this must be Margot. Mr. Eastwood is expecting you both. They followed him down the same hallway. Margot's hand found Vera's and squeezed tight. Her palm was sweaty. Vera squeezed back. The office door opened. Clint Eastwood stood by his desk, but he wasn't alone. Richard Feldman was there, looking uncomfortable. So was another man Vera didn't recognize. Older, silver-haired, expensive suit. Ms. Costello, Margot. Clint's voice was warm. Thank you for coming. Please sit. They sat. Vera's heart hammered against her ribs. Clint gestured to the silver-haired man. This is Harold Chen. He's the head of the film department at USC. Harold, this is Margot Costello. Harold stood and shook Margot's hand. Your mother's told me quite a bit about you. Well, not your mother directly. Mr. Eastwood shared her letter. Vera felt the blood drain from her face. Her letter, the private, raw, honest letter she'd written at 3 a.m, he'd shared it? I hope you don't mind, Clint said, catching her expression. But Harold needed to understand the context. Context for what? Vera's voice came out strangled. Harold smiled. For the scholarship. USC has a full-ride program for exceptional students in the arts. Piano performance, in your daughter's case. 4 years, full tuition, room and board, and a stipend for living expenses. If she's interested. The room tilted. Vera gripped the arms of her chair. Margot's voice was tiny. What? Mr. Eastwood called me yesterday, Harold continued. Yeah, told me about a young pianist who practices 4 hours a day on a used upright piano, who got into Juilliard on talent alone, who has a mother willing to sacrifice everything for her art. That's the kind of student we want at USC. But I applied to Juilliard, Margot said, confused. I didn't apply to USC. Consider this a direct offer. You'd have to audition, of course, but Mr. Eastwood assures me you're ready. Harold pulled out a folder. Our piano department is one of the finest in the country. Not Juilliard, perhaps, but it's incredible, Margot interrupted, her eyes shining. I don't understand. Why would you do this? Harold looked at Clint, who leaned back against his desk, arms crossed. Because your mother taught me something, Clint said quietly. In her letter, and she wrote about showing up instead of just saying the words, about presence instead of promises. And I realized I've spent 30 years refusing to say I love you on screen because I wanted to protect what those words mean. But I've never thought about what I could do instead. What showing up might look like. He pushed a stack of papers across the desk toward Vera. She recognized the top page, her revised ending, the one she'd submitted before quitting. Your new ending is perfect, Clint said. Everything I wanted but didn't know how to ask for. Jackson doesn't say the words. He makes the choice. He stays when leaving would be easier. He sacrifices what he wants for what Eleanor needs. It's real. It's true. Richard Feldman cleared his throat. The studio approved it this morning, pending your agreement to return to the project. Us, of course. Vera couldn't speak. Her throat had closed completely. But here's the thing, Clint continued. You quit. You walked away from $2 million because you thought I'd reject your work. Because you thought choosing artistic integrity meant choosing against your daughter. He paused. That's the same mistake I've been making. Thinking that protecting something sacred means never using it, never taking the risk. He picked up Vera's letter from his desk. You wrote, I've spent years saying I love you to my daughter while thinking about deadlines, while being physically present but mentally absent. That hit me hard, Vera, because I've done the same thing in my work. I've protected those 3 words so fiercely that I forgot. The point wasn't the words themselves. It was what they represent. Sacrifice, presence, showing up when it costs you everything. Margot was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. Vera wanted to comfort her, but couldn't move. So here's what I'm proposing, Clint said. You come back on the film, full pay, full credit. We shoot your ending, the real one. And I make sure your daughter has a future that doesn't depend on you compromising your art. Not because I'm some kind of hero, but because that's what showing up looks like. That's what love looks like when you strip away the easy words. The office was completely silent except for the sound of Margot trying not to sob. Vera found her voice finally. I can't accept charity. It's not charity, Harold interjected. Margot still has to audition, still has to maintain a 3.5 GPA, still has to prove she belongs at USC. The scholarship is merit-based, Mr. Eastwood just made sure we knew she existed, so scholarships go to people who need them and deserve them, Clint added. Margot qualifies on both counts. I just opened a door. She still has to walk through it. Vera looked at her daughter. Margot's face was wet, hopeful, terrified, and shining all at once. Baby, Vera whispered. What do you think? I think... Margot's voice cracked. I think USC has an amazing piano program. I think I'd be lucky to study there. I think... Yes, if they'll have me. Harold smiled. The audition is next week. Can you prepare a 20-minute program? I've been ready for months. Everyone in the room seemed to exhale at once. Richard Feldman stood, extending his hand to Vera. So we have a deal? You're back on Dust and Devotion? Vera stood slowly. Her legs felt unsteady. She shook his hand. We have a deal. Excellent. We start principal photography in 6 weeks. You'll need to be on set for rewrites, continuity, all the usual. Richard, Clint interrupted gently. Give them a minute. Feldman and Harold excused themselves, leaving Vera, Margot, and Clint alone in the office. Margot stood, walked to Clint, and hugged him. He stiffened for just a second, clearly not used to displays of emotion, then relaxed and patted her shoulder awkwardly. Thank you, Margot whispered. Thank you for seeing us. When she stepped back, Clint's eyes were suspiciously bright. Your mother saw me first, he said. In that letter. She understood what I've been trying to protect all these years, and she helped me see that protecting something doesn't mean locking it away. Sometimes it means putting it into action. He turned to Vera. Yeah, I still won't say the line. Page 98 stays as you wrote it. Jackson makes the choice, burns the bounty, stays with Eleanor without explanation. But I want you to know why I'm so sure that's right. It's not stubbornness. It's not some artistic principle disconnected from real life. He paused, choosing his words. My father died when I was 21. Never told me he loved me, not once. But when I was 17, I got into trouble. Stupid kid stuff. Could have derailed my whole life. He worked a double shift for 6 months to pay for a lawyer to make it go away. Never mentioned it. Never held it over me. Just did it. Clint's voice got quieter. I found out years later from my mother. He'd turned down a promotion he'd been working toward for a decade because the new position would have meant he couldn't work the extra shifts. He chose me over everything he'd wanted for himself. And he never said a word about it. Vera felt tears on her cheeks. That's love, Clint said simply. Not the words, the choice, the sacrifice, the showing up when no one's watching and you don't get credit. He smiled slightly. Your letter reminded me that I've been so busy protecting those words, I forgot to live them. So thank you for writing it, for being honest, for walking away when you thought it was right, even when it cost you everything. Margot reached for Vera's hand. They stood together, mother and daughter, crying in Clint Eastwood's office while he looked out the window and pretended not to notice. Finally, Vera found her voice. I need to ask you something. Anything. In the letter I wrote, I was honest about my failures as a mother. Now it's about being absent, even when I was present, about using words instead of action. She paused. Did that make you think less of me? Clint turned from the window. It made me think you're human, and brave enough to admit it. Most people spend their whole lives pretending they've got it all figured out. He smiled. Besides, you're here now, with your daughter, fully present. That counts for something. They talked for another 30 minutes about the production schedule, about Margot's audition, about practical details that felt surreal, given everything that had just happened. As they were leaving, Clint called out, Vera? She turned back. That line. I love you. The one I won't say. He paused. Make sure you say it to Margot tonight, and mean it. Be there when you say it. That's the difference. Vera nodded, unable to speak. Like in the car, driving home, Margot was vibrating with nervous energy. Mom, I have to practice. The audition is in 6 days. I need to choose my pieces. I need to... Margot. Her daughter stopped mid-sentence. I love you, Vera said. Not because Clint told me to say it, not because it's what mothers are supposed to say, but because you are the bravest, most talented person I know. And I'm sorry for all the times I said those words while thinking about something else. I'm here now, right now, completely. Margot was crying again. I love you too, Mom. They drove home in comfortable silence, holding hands across the center console. That night, Vera didn't go to her typewriter. Instead, she sat on the piano bench next to Margot and listened. Really listened, as her daughter played through possible audition pieces. Chopin, Rachmaninoff, Debussy. Each note precise and full of longing. When Margot finished, exhausted and exhilarated, Vera pulled her close. "You're going to be amazing." "What if I'm not ready?" "You've been ready for years. I just wasn't paying attention." They sat together in the darkening living room, the piano silent now, both of them fully present for the first time in longer than either could remember. At midnight, after Margot had gone to bed, Vera's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. "Hello? Miss Costello? This is the USC admissions office. I apologize for calling so late, but Mr. Chen asked me to reach out. Margot's audition has been moved up to tomorrow at 2 p.m. We had a cancellation. Is she available?" Tomorrow. Margot had 6 days to prepare, and now she had 12 hours. "She'll be there," Vera said. She hung up and stood in her dark kitchen, heart pounding. Tomorrow. Everything would change tomorrow. She should wake Margot, let her practice through the night. But instead, Vera walked quietly to her daughter's bedroom door and listened to her breathing. Deep, peaceful, dreaming. She let her sleep. In the morning, everything would begin. Vera didn't sleep. She sat in the kitchen watching the clock tick toward morning, thinking about choices and sacrifices and all the ways love could be shown without words. At 4 a.m., she made coffee. At 5, she heard Margot stirring. When her daughter appeared in the kitchen doorway, hair tangled from sleep, Vera took a breath. "Your audition got moved up. It's today at 2. Margot's face went white. "Today? But I'm not..." "You're ready," Vera said firmly. "Yeah, you've been ready since you were 8 years old and first heard Chopin. The only question is whether you believe it." Margot stood frozen for 10 seconds. Then she turned and walked straight to the piano. She played for 6 hours. Vera made her stop only to eat toast and drink water. Between pieces, Margot's hands shook, but when they touched the keys, they were steady. Certain. Fearless. At 1 o'clock, they drove to USC in silence. Margot clutched her sheet music like a lifeline. Vera wanted to say something encouraging, something motherly and wise, but every phrase that came to mind felt cheap, insufficient. So she just reached over and squeezed Margot's hand. Her daughter squeezed back. The audition room was smaller than Vera expected. A grand piano dominated the space. 3 faculty members sat behind a long table with clipboards and tired expressions. They'd probably heard 20 pianists that week alone. Harold Chen was there. He nodded at Vera, gestured for her to sit in the back. Margot Costello? A woman with silver hair and kind eyes looked up. "Whenever you're ready." Margot walked to the piano, sat, placed her hands on the keys. Then she paused, longer than was comfortable. The faculty members exchanged glances. Vera's heart hammered. Finally, Margot began. She'd chosen Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor. It was ambitious. Too ambitious, maybe. A piece that required technical mastery and emotional depth. A piece that could expose every weakness. But Margot didn't have weaknesses. Not when she played. The first notes filled the room like a question being asked. Then the answer came. Delicate, then building, then crashing into something that made Vera's chest ache. She watched her daughter disappear into the music, watched her become something more than a 16-year-old girl scared about her future. Margot played like she had nothing to lose, like the music was the only truth that mattered. During a particular passage, Margot paused, a deliberate silence longer than the score indicated. The space between notes hung in the air like held breath. When she continued, the returning melody meant more because of what came before. Vera understood suddenly why Clint Eastwood had insisted on silence. Why some things were too important to rush. Why the spaces between words could mean more than the words themselves. When the final note faded, no one moved. Then Harold Chen started clapping. The other faculty members joined in, genuine smiles breaking through their professional facades. The silver-haired woman spoke first. "That pause in the middle section, that wasn't in the score." "No, ma'am." Margot's voice was steady despite her shaking hands. But it felt necessary, like the silence was part of the story. The woman smiled. It was perfect. They asked Margot to play a second piece, Bach's Prelude and Fugue in C-sharp major. Then a third, something of her own choosing. She chose Rachmaninoff, brutal and beautiful, and played it like she was born for it. When it was over, Harold walked Margot and Vera into the hallway. "We'll need to convene officially," he said, "but between us, she's in. Full scholarship. 4 years. That pause in the Chopin?" He shook his head, amazed. That was remarkable. She understood something most pianists take decades to learn, that silence can be as powerful as sound. Margot burst into tears. Harold excused himself gracefully, leaving mother and daughter alone in the corridor. Vera held Margot while she cried, relief and joy and exhaustion all mixed together. She didn't say anything, just held her and let her feel everything fully. "I did it," Margot whispered finally. "I really did it." "You did it," Vera agreed. They drove home in a daze, stopped for ice cream even though it was barely 4 p.m. Sat in the car eating chocolate chip cookie dough and laughing about nothing and everything. When they got home, there was an envelope wedged in the front door. Vera's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were 2 things. First, a check for $2 million, her full payment for Dust and Devotion, despite everything that had happened. Second, a new script page labeled Page 98 Final, with a handwritten note from Clint Eastwood clipped to it. Margot read over her shoulder as Vera unfolded the note. "Vera, you understood. Keep the money, raise your daughter. But read this first. You taught me that protecting something sacred doesn't mean never using it. It means using it right." So I rewrote page 98. Not because your version was wrong, it was perfect. But because I finally understood what Jackson would actually do. This is the scene that silence created. Thank you for showing me the difference between saying and doing. We start shooting in 6 weeks. I hope you'll be there. Vera's hands shook as she turned to the script page. Margot pressed close, reading along. Exterior, Eleanor's cabin. Knight Jackson stands in the doorway, watching Eleanor sleep. She's sick with fever, has been for 3 days. Her breathing is shallow, labored. On the table, a bounty notice for Jesse Crane. $50,000. Wanted 3 towns over. Jackson has been hunting Crane for 30 years. This is his last chance. Jackson picks up the notice, studies it. This bounty would change everything, enough money to finally stop running, to buy land, to rest. 30 years of hunting, and it all comes down to this choice. He looks at Eleanor, then at the notice, then back to Eleanor. Without a word, Jackson walks to the fireplace. He holds the bounty notice over the flames. For a long moment, he just stands there, the paper trembling in his hand. Then he lets it go. The notice catches fire, curls, turns to ash. Jackson doesn't watch it burn. He's already moving to Eleanor's bedside, and he soaks a cloth in cool water, places it on her forehead. His weathered hands are gentle. He settles into the chair beside her bed. Outside, the sun is setting. If he left now, he could still catch Crane. Still claim the bounty. Still get everything he's worked for. But he doesn't move. Fade to exterior. Eleanor's cabin. Dawn first light. Eleanor's eyes flutter open. The fever is broken. She turns her head slowly. Jackson is still in the chair, asleep, his hand still holding a damp cloth. Exhausted. Present. On the table, she notices ash from burned paper. She doesn't know what it was. Doesn't need to. She looks at Jackson. Really looks at him. At the lines in his face, the silver in his hair, the choice he doesn't know she sees. Eleanor whispered, so quiet he can't hear. "I know." Jackson stirs but doesn't wake. Eleanor closes her eyes again, a small smile on her lips. Fade to black. Vera finished reading and couldn't speak. Tears streamed down her face. Not sad tears, but something else. Recognition, maybe, or relief. "Mom?" Margot's voice was soft. Is that the ending?" "Yes." "He never says it, neither of them do." "No." "But you know anyway. You know exactly what it means." Vera nodded, unable to form words. Margot was quiet for a moment. Then, "That pause I added in the Chopin today? The one the professor asked about?" "Yeah?" "I was thinking about this. About the story you told me. About Mr. Eastwood refusing to say the line." Margot's eyes were bright. "I thought, what if the most important thing isn't the notes you play, but the silence between them? The space where you let the music breathe? Time where you show what you mean without saying it?" Vera pulled her daughter close, overwhelmed by the strange, circular beauty of it all. Clint had taught her about silence. She'd written it into the script. Margot had put it into her music. And now it had all come back around, transformed into something none of them could have created alone. "You're brilliant," Vera whispered. "You know that?" "I learned from you." That evening, Vera called Clint Eastwood's office. She didn't expect him to answer personally, but he did. "Vera, did you get the page?" "I did." Her voice was thick. "It's perfect. It's everything." "You gave me the bones of it. I just added the details." "The line Eleanor whispers at the end, 'I know.' That's the only words that matter," Clint finished. "Because she sees what he did. She understands what he gave up. The words aren't the confession. They're the acknowledgement that confession already happened through action." Vera closed her eyes. "When do we start shooting?" 6 weeks, February 15th. You'll be on set?" "Every day." "Good." He paused. "How did Margot's audition go?" "She got in. Full scholarship. Vera's voice broke. "She played this piece with a pause in the middle. The professor said it was remarkable. She said she learned it from your story, from understanding that silence can be powerful." Clint was quiet for so long, Vera thought the connection had dropped. Then, "Tell her I'm proud of her. Tell her she understood something most people never learn." "I will." "And Vera, that thing I said about making sure to tell Margot you love her?" "Yes." "I was wrong. You don't need to say it at all. Just keep showing up. Keep being present. Keep making the hard choices when it would be easier to walk away. She'll know. That's what matters." They talked for a few more minutes about logistics, schedules, details, but Vera barely heard them. She was thinking about her father at her terrible Pilgrim play, about Clint's father working double shifts, about Jackson burning the bounty notice, about all the ways love existed in the spaces between words. After she hung up, Vera sat at her desk and looked at the check for $2 million. It felt different now, not like salvation or security, but like acknowledgement. Like Clint was saying, "I see you. I see what you sacrificed. I see what you chose." She endorsed the check, deposited it the next morning, set aside money for taxes, for Margot's expenses, for the house repairs they'd been delaying for 3 years. But she didn't feel rich. She felt something better. Seen. 10 years later, present day. Vera sat in the archive room at Warner Brothers, holding the original script page, and smiled. Dust and Devotion had premiered in 1994. Critics called it Eastwood's masterpiece, a love story that trusted silence more than speech. It was nominated for 7 Academy Awards, won 3 including Best Original Screenplay. Vera's name in gold letters, written by Vera Costello. But she hadn't written another Hollywood screenplay after that. The offers came, of course they did, after the Oscars, but she turned them all down. Instead, she taught screenwriting at the community college in Pasadena. 15 students per semester, many of them working parents, immigrants, people who wrote between shifts and hoped for something better. She taught them about structure and character. But mostly she taught them about silence, about the spaces between words, about showing instead of telling. She was home every night for dinner. Home when Margot called from USC, excited or frustrated or homesick. home in ways she hadn't been before. Margot had graduated summa cum laude, turned down offers from symphonies to pursue a different path. She became a concert pianist known for contemporary compositions, pieces that emphasized space and silence as much as sound. Critics called her revolutionary. Last month, Margot had performed at Carnegie Hall. Vera sat in the audience, surrounded by people in expensive clothes and diamonds, and watched her daughter command the stage. During a particular passage, Margot paused longer than written, in a silence that made 2,000 people hold their breath simultaneously. When she resumed, the notes carried weight they wouldn't have had without the emptiness before. In that silence, Vera understood completely what Clint Eastwood had been trying to protect all those years ago. Some things were too sacred to speak, too important to reduce to simple declarations. The most powerful truths lived in actions, in choices, in the quiet moments when no one was watching, and you did the right thing anyway. After the concert, Vera met Margot backstage. Her daughter was radiant, exhausted, still vibrating with adrenaline. They looked at each other across the crowded room. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. Margot had a boyfriend now, a kind man named David who taught literature at NYU. He was good to her, patient, present. Vera liked him because he understood that Margot's music came first, and he supported it without resentment. Last week, he'd asked Vera's permission to propose. "Does Margot know?" Vera had asked. "Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first." "Why?" David had smiled. "Because Mr. Eastwood called me." Vera had been stunned. "Clint called you?" "He said he was a friend of the family. Said he wanted to make sure I understood something important." David's eyes were serious. "He told me that if I ever proposed to Margot, I better mean it. That words like 'I love you' and 'I'll marry you' are sacred. That if I'm going to say them, I better be prepared to prove them every single day through action." Vera had started crying right there in the coffee shop. "What did you tell him?" she'd asked. "I told him I understood. Yeah, that I'd show Margot I love her every day for the rest of my life. That the words would just be confirmation of what I was already doing. Then you have my blessing." Now, standing in the archive room, holding the script page that had changed her life, Vera thought about all of it. About Clint refusing to say 3 words. About Margot's pause in the Chopin that had won her the scholarship. About David understanding that promises meant nothing without follow-through. About her father at her Pilgrim play, and Clint's father working double shifts, and Jackson burning the bounty notice. About all the ways love existed in silence. The archivist appeared in the doorway again. "Mrs. Costello, we really do need to close now." "I know, I'm done." She carefully returned the script page to its protective sleeve. Tomorrow, it would go back in the vault with all the other pieces of Hollywood history. But tonight, she'd needed to see it, to remember. She drove home slowly, taking surface streets instead of the highway. She was in no hurry. Margot was coming for dinner, bringing David, excited to show off her mother's pot roast, nervous about something Vera suspected but wouldn't ask about. When she pulled into her driveway, Vera sat in the car for a moment, looking at her small house. The same house where she'd burned toast and received the phone call that changed everything. The same piano where Margot had practiced for 4 hours a day on a $300 upright. So much had changed. So much had stayed the same. Inside, she started cooking, set the table for 3, put on music, one of Margot's recordings, a piece built around silence and space. At 6:30, the doorbell rang. Margot stood on the porch with David, her face glowing with a secret. Vera knew immediately what was coming. "Mom," Margot said, her voice trembling slightly. "David has something to ask you." But before he could speak, Vera pulled them both inside, into the warmth and light of home. "Later," she said. "First, let's eat. Let's be here together. Everything else can wait." They sat around the table, 3 people sharing pot roast and conversation and presents. David told terrible jokes. Margot laughed. Vera watched them both and felt something she'd spent years searching for. peace. After dinner, David did ask his question. Margot said yes through happy tears. They made plans and talked about venues and dates. But Vera barely heard the details. She was thinking about something else. She never said, "I love you" to Margot that night. She didn't need to. She'd shown her daughter for 26 years running, through sacrifices and choices and being present when it would have been easier to drift away, through burnt toast and late-night rewrites and sitting beside her at a piano bench instead of chasing the next big opportunity, through all the quiet moments that added up to a life. And that, Vera finally understood, was worth any price. Some things were too sacred for words, even the most beautiful ones. So she said nothing. She just stayed. She showed up. And in the comfortable silence of her kitchen, surrounded by the people she loved most, Vera Costello smiled. The story was complete. Not because anyone had said the right words, but because everyone had made the right choices. And that made all the difference. So where are you watching this from? Drop your country or city in the comments below. I'd love to know where our amazing viewers are from around the world. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button. It really helps us spread these inspiring stories to more people who need to hear them. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss another story about kindness, sacrifice, and what really matters in life. There's another incredible story appearing on your screen right now that I think you're going to love. Click on it and keep the inspiration going. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the most powerful words are the ones we never say.